All right, so welcome to Crash Course of Climb. This is our weekly kind of chat on topics in climbing. So I usually like to start with kind of an extended intro on what Crash Course of Climb really is. So we meet every time. It's going to be Tuesday at 12 p.m. That is an updated time from our starting time that we had at the beginning of the semester, which was Fridays at 6 o'clock. So if you go back to watch the recordings, which I would highly recommend you do at some, after watching this one, if you want to get caught up on where we're at, then you can do that online. They're not necessarily like things that you have to watch before watching these, but they certainly help, and there's a lot of good information in some of the previous episodes. So it's going to be presented primarily by myself. My name is Josh Leyland. I am the current UCF Climbing Tower lead. And every now and then I might ask someone else to come in and present a topic, but for now it seems like I'll be doing most of them. As I mentioned before, there is, like a topic per week, so that we do weekly topics. We've done things like modes of climbing, so what types of climbing there is that exists. We've done a talk on tying knots and hitches, and we're going to be talking actually today about some jump to crag type of stuff. So that's going from climbing indoors to transitioning to climbing outdoors, which is kind of a big step. For the most part, these sessions are going to be me providing instruction on things or me presenting topics for discussion. So if you feel, like jumping in or having kind of a chat with it, then you can jump in and ask questions and kind of discuss things that are going on. But that's kind of the format of it. It's pretty open-ended. If you ever have a question or you want to jump in, I'm totally interruptible. You can jump on in and, kind of share what you have on what you want to say. But yeah, that's pretty much how Crash Course of Climb works. It's going to be doing this. We're going to be doing this every single Tuesday until the end of the semester or so. So I believe our last session is in December, maybe the 2nd or the 3rd, can't quite remember. So yeah, just keep staying tuned with us. We do record these, like I said. They do get posted to the Climbing Towers section of the RWC website. So if I was going to recommend watching at least one of the recordings, the biggest and best one you probably would want to watch is our one on climbing terminology. I do my very best to explain any terminology that I just throw around randomly. But watching that, makes it really easy to understand what we're talking about and have a good leg up on what's going on. So yeah, without further ado, then we'll get right into the topic, which I already kind of started talking about, which is gym to crag, what do I need to get? So when I'm saying gym, that's just indoor climbing, and when I'm saying crag, that's kind of a term just for any outdoor wall that you're climbing. So this guy in this picture here is climbing on a crag somewhere. A crag's usually going to be kind of like a set of walls. It's not necessarily a single climb or a single wall. If you say like, oh, I was at the crag this weekend, then someone can just assume, well, they're outside climbing. That's pretty much all you need for it. And we're going to be talking mostly about the actual physical stuff that you would need to get or, have access to go outside. But we'll be talking a little bit more about the mindset too, kind of just how you need to place yourself mentally and logistically before going on a trip like this, right? So I put your climbing is already hard enough indoors. So like taking that step outside makes it, adds all this extra stuff to it, makes it even harder to figure out what you want to do. So today we're going to talk about how to get started with transitioning to outside and kind of how to approach that. So the first thing you need to get is a plan, right? So we're talking logistically right now. In this picture here, I do have a picture of a guidebook. I find that many guidebooks or many of the popular, well put together ones are going to be a Falcon guide. You see on the top left there, it says it's a Falcon guide. That's just a publishing brand basically. And they make a lot of stuff for climbing guides. They do a lot of area guides, state guides, stuff like that. They also do dive into instructional things. So if you're looking at like how to guide stuff outdoors or how to do certain technical things outdoors, the Falcon Guide series, they do a whole bunch of stuff and all of that. So they're a really good resource for lots of climbing stuff. But I mean, this is just kind of a quick example of what a guidebook might look like. A guidebook's pretty much going to tell you, once you're in the area and you're doing your thing, how do you find the routes? How do you get to them? What difficulty are they? Do people like these routes? That sort of thing. So yeah, but I mean, outside of the guidebook in general, right? So you commit yourself, you're like, I want to go climbing outside, or someone invites you or something like that, right? Well, now all of a sudden there's a lot of stuff you got to get figured out, because when you go climbing indoors, you can just see when the place is open and then go there. And whether or not you have your own gear, you can either, bring your own gear or rent out some gear, buy some gear, whatever. And then you just start climbing. Like you sign a waiver and you get going, you do your own thing. People are watching you, people are keeping an eye on you, making sure that what you're doing aligns with their safety protocols. But outside is just going to be different, right? So the first thing you need to figure out is location, right? So if the place, like we live in Florida, at least I'm assuming we all live in Florida. then there's not really any outdoor climbing in Florida at all. So you have to leave the state, right? That's a thing right there. Maybe you want to leave the country to go to where you're climbing. There's lots of great climbing in places like Taiwan or in Kyrgyzstan and stuff like that. But those are really far places, right? So you have to kind of figure out your location. And if it's within the United States, you have to figure out, what states have popular climbing destinations. States like North Carolina are going to be full of traditional climbing routes where you have to bring all your own hardware to put in cracks and climb like that. So it's a higher skill grade. Or maybe you want to go to somewhere like, I don't know, the Red River Gorge in Kentucky, and where they have a lot of kind of everything. They have traditional climbing, they have sport climbing routes, they have boulder routes where you might not even need to bring that much gear. Like finding that location that works for your trip is going to really, determine what you're doing. Or if you say, hey, I want to go out and climb lots of sport routes, you're going to be somewhat limited in what areas you would like to go to, right? So yeah, locations, big one. You need to figure out where to go. It helps to have backups, like if this location is not going to work out, then, what other places also offer the same type of experience that I'm looking for. Which leads us straight into that types of climbing, right? So do you want to go traditional climbing? Do you want to go ice climbing somewhere? Do you want to just do normal sport climbing? Are you trying to boulder? Like there's a lot of different types of climbing, and maybe you want to do a bunch of it. Maybe you want to do one style. So that's going to, again, play into that location. So definitely planning that out is essential when you're looking to go outside, right? Another one is route ratings. You might end up going to an area, you'll say, well, this place has lots of great, I don't know, crack climbs. I'm looking to climb inside cracks, right? And you're like, well, that's awesome. I want to go ahead and do that. I can climb, relatively intermediate grades indoors. Maybe I'll go do that. And then you might find yourself going out there and then everything there is just way too hard, right? And then that's going to be really disappointing. So part of getting that plan together is looking at the route ratings, looking at the route distributions. You want to make sure that where you're going, it doesn't just have one route that you can definitely do and then has like a whole bunch of stuff that's going to absolutely knock you on your feet, right? So knowing the difficulties, knowing kind of what you have to work with in that location, in that type of climbing that you're doing, super important. Probably the most depressing one on this list is the weather, right? Personally, I find that, it seems like the weather only gets bad when you want to go on a climbing trip. It only comes in for that small period of time or whatever period of time you're going to be there. That's when the weather likes to creep in, it seems like. So, weather is humongous, right? You don't have to worry about the weather when you're going indoors. If it rains, if there's a thunderstorm, you just go inside and keep climbing. It doesn't really matter. But outdoors, if you find yourself on a rope climb, or even in a boulder climb, like if you're out in the woods in the middle of nowhere and the weather gets bad, that's bad. So getting a plan together, to kind of scope out what the weather might look like. Most weather apps, most weather websites will give you like a 15-day kind of notice to kind of figure it out. And that can be accurate. Obviously weather changes, so you never really know. So that's it's gonna depend on what kind of trip you're doing. If it's something short, like a weekend trip, you can afford to wait till it gets closer to the day. But if you're planning something big, like if it's an alpine climb where you're trying to basically get up the top of a mountain by ice climbing, rock climbing, scrambling around, doing whatever it takes to get on top of an entire mountain, you might be out there for quite an extended period of time. So that kind of weather planning might look like just looking at weather patterns of the past decade and then, just trying to pick what you believe may be the best time to go. So weather could be a lot more involved depending on the type of climbing that you're doing. Another thing that's super important is, finding hospitals, emergency rooms, that kind of stuff. If you get hurt, whether it's bouldering or top roping, and then bouldering is, bouldering is a big place to get hurt because every fall that you take while you're bouldering, you're not protected by a rope. You're climbing short things, sure, but you're always falling to the ground. So even if it's, bouldering off the side of the road and like a little bit in the woods, you still need to know, like have at least a working knowledge of where the hospitals and emergency rooms are, just in case things go south, right? And that's also going to kind of play into if people are with our first aid trained or if they have first aid supplies, that type of stuff. That's all super important. Because we are humans, we also need to eat to live. So groceries and food are super good to have around. You want to have an idea if there's grocery places around you, then you can go get them. If it's more of an extended trip, then you want to pack appropriately, so pack enough food to work with that. But with what we're talking about, if you're going to go climb outside for the first time, you're probably not going to go on like a really long extended trip in the first place, right? So usually smart to pick a place that, has a lot of climbs in a small area, something for like a weekend trip, and then has groceries nearby, something that you can access pretty easily. Along with the groceries and food, you need to pick the right kind of lodging or camping site. Some people like to Airbnb or stay with friends or family. Some people like to camp. Some climbing sites even have camping on the climbing area, right? So that's a really convenient option to have. Really just knowing what you have available to you and knowing how to find those options and knowing where the groceries and stuff around that is, that's all you need. And with that, you need to also have the appropriate camping gear, right? So that's just another stack of stuff that goes on top of what you don't have to worry about for indoor climbing, right? You don't have to bring more than just a backpack with maybe a rope, maybe a harness, or if you're bouldering, maybe just your shoes and chalk, stuff like that. Now, when I have that second to last point as approach, what I'm talking about is the approach is basically the path leading up to a climb or a wall or an area, right? So if you wanted to be funny, you could say the approach to an indoor climb is walking from your car to the front door of the climbing place, right? That's the approach. It's very simple. You walk straight from your car and go that way. Now, when you're climbing, like 9 times out of 10, and sometimes it's not the case, but 9 times out of 10, you can't just drive up to the climb you're going to do. Like you have to park somewhere and then hike for some amount of time. That hike is what we're going to call the approach, and it may be rigorous. It may be simple. You never know. Some places might have like a 2 to 5 minute approach that's light, it's easy trekking, and it just takes you straight down to the base of the cliff and you can go. Some places you might have to hike for several miles on treacherous terrain just to get to where the climbs are even at. Maybe you can't even see them when you park. And then some climbs might not even really have an approach to the base of the cliff. Maybe you have to start at the top of the cliff and then set up a rope system to lower someone down and have them climb up to you. An approach is like knowing what the approach is and having an idea of what you're getting yourself into is gonna really help you out so that way you can plan accordingly. If the approach is pretty bad, you might need to bring a lot of extra water because you're gonna be drinking water on the way in and on the way out of that climb, right? And then you're gonna be drinking water throughout the day. So you may have to actually pack more or less stuff or use different types of shoes or all sorts of other things depending on what the approach looks like. And a lot of times guidebooks like this one in this picture will kind of have a description of what the approach is for most walls, most areas that have sets of climbs. So if you go to a crag, you can kind of break it down into there's a crag, which is pretty much the whole entire area. And then there's separate walls that are usually titled, they have their own names. And then, there's an approach to each one of those walls, kind of, that's how it usually works. And out the walls, it's split into all the climbs they have. And then for boulder areas, it's kind of, you hike, the approach goes to an area or a field of boulders. That's typically kind of what you're working with when you're bouldering. The last thing I have on here is just kind of like basic locating and social type of stuff. So, I mean, you don't have to have Wi-Fi outdoors, of course, but I mean, knowing whether or not you do certainly helps. So while you're camping, are you going to be able to call people? Are you going to be able to look things up? Are you going to be able to check the weather while you're out there? Is there cell service? Is there electricity? Can you charge things? Maybe you have a generator or a battery. Can you charge your flashlights? Can you charge your phones? Can you use your laptop at all? Is this more of a roughing it type of deal? That sort of thing. And then the last bit I have there is water, right? Do you have access to water? That's like a really, really big one, of course. Like if you're going to be out there, even for a weekend, you need to have a pretty steady source of water. So are you boiling water? Are you using life straws, or are you, using a faucet? Do you have, access to potable water? All super important questions when you're forming a plan for climbing outdoors, right? Now, luckily, like this is a lot of stuff to worry about and look at. The best advice I have, at least for going outdoors, is like you don't have to go out by yourself or like go out with a bunch of people who also have not been outdoors and plan all this on your first go. Typically, you'll find someone, that has already gone outside and you've heard about it. And maybe they invite you or you inquire about going on a climbing trip, something like that. And you say like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. Help me out. And then they'll kind of invite you, give you probably a packing list. And then they'll do a lot of this front loading work of, figuring out where to go, what the weather looks like, what stuff is around. Is there, all the amenities you need. So really, it's a lot like a camping trip. Like it's just like a camping trip. You just also have to kind of scope out what climbs are there, what the climbs look like. You're just adding an extra component to camping, or you're adding camping and a lot of extra stuff to indoor climbing, that sort of deal. So yeah, that's pretty much the plan part of the portion of going outside. So does anyone have any questions at all about what's going on so far? I will take that as a no. All right, so first we're going to talk about bouldering, like going outside and bouldering first. The first thing I want to say about bouldering is that it's a pretty awesome way to actually break into climbing outdoors for the first time, because there's just so much less to worry about, whether that's, technically or just gear-wise. You don't have to bring as much gear. You don't have to do as much stuff to set things up. So going outside just to kind of get the feel for the rocks in the first place and just kind of experience the difference between climbing indoors and outdoors. Usually bouldering is going to give you a pretty good idea of, or a pretty good chance to actually get outside and have a pretty solid time on your first go. But I mean, the only things you really need to get if you don't have them are crash pads, chalk, climbing tape, and shoes fit for bouldering, right? So the biggest one on this list is going to be that first one I put there. That's going to be the crash pads for sure, by far. Because when you climb indoors, there's already like pads and like built-in like floor pads that are already there anyways. You don't even have to move them around. They're just there. You don't even have to think about them. It's just when you fall, they're there. You're ready to go. When you're outside, you're falling on the ground. You're falling on other rocks. You're falling on who knows what. So having crash pads is like totally essential to make sure that your ankles live through the weekend. So, I mean, crash pads, they are relatively expensive. They're like anywhere between like $100 and $500, depending on which ones you get. So definitely nice to find someone that already has them and go on the trip and kind of get the experience of, grabbing the rocks and going from there. Now, crash pads are, they're useful, they're good, they work, but you really need to make sure that the people you're with are making them work. And what I mean by that is using proper spotting techniques, right? So you can put those on the ground and you can start climbing a boulder out, and that's all fine and dandy. But if you fall, I mean, like someone's got to make sure that they're directing you towards the pad or moving the pad as you climb, to actually somewhat protect you. So yeah, that's super important. If you go on a bouldering trip, like that's a non-negotiable. You got to bring crash pads. That's just the way it works. As for the rest of it, I'd say the first thing you actually want to think about getting besides the crash pad, or just in general, if someone else already has the crash pads, is just shoes fit for bouldering. So that's on the end there, but I mean, climbing shoes are pretty essential. You can technically climb things in whatever shoe you want. You can wear your tennis shoes. That would technically work, but that's highly discourageable just because they're not meant for that. They're tennis shoes. They're meant for running and playing tennis and things of that sort. Shoes fit for bouldering are meant for bouldering. That's kind of how that works, right? Now, when I say it's shoes fit for bouldering, they're not actually going to be different necessarily than climbing shoes that you would use on a rope climb. It's just typically when you use a shoe fit for bouldering, it's more what we call aggressive. It's more pointed. It's more tight. It's more technical. It certainly has all of its own good uses for rope climbing as well. But you can pop these on and off a lot. You're going to be moving around to a bunch of different climbs. So having some nice technical shoes with good climbing rubber, that's going to give you the best advantage on the routes that you're starting to climb outdoors. So the other two bits, chalk, another essential for climbing, really. Your hands are going to get wet. They're going to get sweaty. The rock might be slightly damp. There's just all these different factors. Chalk just gives you, a little bit more grip to kind of work through what you're working on. And I mean, once you go outside for the first time, you'll really get an understanding of that. You'll feel the rock. You'll feel like, hey, this is kind of tough to hang on to. That chalk just gives you that extra little gain right there. And the third option I have here is climbing tape. So I would say outdoors, it's a lot easier for you to mess up your hands and your fingers just by straining them so much and like getting them into all sorts of positions. So whether you're indoors or outdoors, you'll find that a lot of people will tape their fingers, tape around their knuckles, cover up cuts. Like if you end up scraping your hand or like popping a blister or something like that, then you'll cover it up with tape. If you go climbing, or if you plan to go climbing for like a weekend trip, and then you get a giant blister on your skin and it rips off on the first day, you're not just going to say, well, I left Florida and came to, North Carolina for the weekend. First day I busted this. Looks like I'm done climbing. Like, no, that's not going to happen. You're going to cover it up. You're going to keep going throughout the day, and you're going to kind of be tender about it and protect it. So that's, mostly what climbing tape is going to be for. The reason I put climbing tape as opposed to like athletic tape or gauze wrap or anything like that is because like climbing tape, again, is something meant for climbing. This stuff is going to be a lot stickier and a lot less stretchy than lots of other types of tapes, which would probably slip off or tear or get really wet and fall, if you use those. So this is going to be a lot better, for staying on your hands while you're climbing. That's kind of the idea. So I'd highly encourage you, if you're going to, get a climbing tape or a tape at all, make sure it's a climbing tape when you're using it for climbing. So yeah. We'll keep moving on forward towards top rope and sport climbing. I just want to give a quick reminder of what top rope and sport climbing is. Top rope climbing is when the rope's already fixed to the top of a climb, right? So if it's outdoors, you're going to have to find a way to go ahead and stick it to the top of a climb. And then sport climbing is where the rope starts at the ground, and then a lead climber, the leader, they are tied into the rope and they secure the rope to the wall as they go up. Eventually they get to the top, and then they probably fix the rope at the top, and thus forth, it becomes a top rope. So yeah, if you are sport climbing or top roping, you're going to want to get these things, or at least find someone with them. Now, some of these, it's going to be a lot better for you to go ahead and have them in the first place. So that's going to be things like a harness. So in that picture there, you can kind of see a harness in the middle, just below that rope there. Yeah, just having your own harness makes life a lot easier. I mean, when people are climbing on a rope, you need to have at least 2 harnesses. You need to have one person on the ground who is belaying you, securing you on the rope, catching you when you fall. They need to have a harness, and then you need to have a harness as well. And that's not just an ambiguous, like, whatever harness. You need to have something that's rated for climbing, certified for climbing. So we're talking CE certified, we're talking UIAA certified. They're a body that governs climbing certifications, safety certifications for climbing gear. You want to be checking those things. So, if you're going to buy any of this gear, you're going to want to buy it from a climbing brand that's trusted, that's reputable. So like, a harness is pretty good. The first one I actually do have on the list is a helmet. So I have my climbing helmet in this webcam right here. I don't know if y'all can see it. But yeah, same thing with the harness, the helmets and the harnesses. You want to try to look for a helmet that's CE certified or UIAA certified. You will find, actually, there's the rare case every now and then where there is a helmet that is CE certified, but it's not UIAA certified, even though it's a climbing brand helmet made for climbing, right? And that's typically because maybe the patent hasn't gone through yet, so they haven't technically gotten it certified. They haven't, really cemented that design. But it's still designed, it's tested. They'll supply, like, manufacturing test results on how the helmet has worked for climbing. And yeah, that's super important. The reason you want to have a climbing helmet as opposed to, like a bike helmet or a skate helmet or, whatever other type of helmet you might have, is really just for the purpose. Like, so these are designed for climbing. And when I say that, what do I mean, right? So if it's designed for climbing, if you fall at some point, there's, the chance that a climber can flip over in their harness. They won't slip out. It'll still hold on to you, but you might go upside down and maybe you'll hit your head against the wall. Now, this will help you on that, but it's not necessarily designed for that. Like, this is not going to necessarily stop you from getting a concussion. It'll probably reduce the chances of it happening, but it's not really designed specifically for that. What it's mostly designed for is rock fall, right? So if you're climbing and let's say you're belaying even, and the climber accidentally kicks down a rock, right? As long as you look down, they yell rock, you keep your head straight or you look down, it'll land on top and it'll just kind of pat the helmet and save you the abrasion from the rock or maybe the blunt force that the rock sends your way. I mean, also if you're belaying too, if they have stuff hanging from their harness, like they're dangling, I don't know, a belay device like this, and this thing falls out of their hand, I don't know. If it strikes you on the head and you're wearing this helmet, then you're protected, right? So really these climbing helmets are mostly going to stop things that are falling on your head from doing, a significant amount of damage. Because if your belayer goes unconscious and they can't catch you, if you go unconscious while climbing, you can't climb anymore. So it's best to have that protection. Helmet's like another non-negotiable for climbing outside. Sadly, you'll see like a lot of people outside not using helmets, just for whatever reason. Maybe they didn't want to buy one. Maybe they don't like the way it feels on their head. That's their choice. But I want to encourage you, if you are going to go climbing outside on ropes, or if you're going to be in the area where people are climbing ropes, like even if you're close to a crag, someone else might be kicking rocks down. You have no idea. So try to wear a helmet when you're in the area. That's a big one. So I also have on there shoes, right? So again, with the shoes, you'll notice that those shoes on the left there, those purple ones, they're pretty flat. They're quite different than the shoes that I had in the other picture, which were a lot more aggressive, right? Really the shoe you use is up to you and kind of dependent on what type of climb you're doing. But yeah, shoes, again, that's kind of something you want to be having for sure. Tennis shoes will not get you very far at all on climbs in terms of difficulty. You'll be able to climb very, very beginner level stuff, but as soon as it starts to become more difficult, you start ramping up that technique. You start, improving yourself. You're going to need to get shoes. Like, climbing shoes are really going to be the game changer there. I also have chalk there. So in this picture, again, it's a chalk bag, and we're assuming there's chalk inside of that bag that's just below the purple shoes there. The chalk bag in this case, is to keep it secured around you. If you're climbing up really high, you need to bring it with you somehow. So you bring a chalk bag that's attached to your hips. You can reach in whenever you need to and grab some chalk on the go. That's the idea there. I did just mention the word belay device, and this is actually our topic for last week, was talking about belay technology, belay devices. If we recall, belaying is the act of, securing someone on a rope. So you're the person with the device supplying friction. You are pulling the rope as they go, so that way they don't fall all the way back down. You're catching them when they fall, and then if a person is ready to come down, you use these devices to lower them down safely and slowly in a controlled manner. So, I mean, if you're going to be using a rope, you're not going to be just, grabbing the rope and holding on to it for the belay. You need to have a belay device. So this is actually a little bit of extra pieces, but basically, that could be something like this manual tube style device where the rope's running in kind of like a tube. And then you just run it through as it is. Talked about it last week. Great video to watch. Lots of cool pictures of all sorts of belay devices. There's just so many different types. But you do need to have at least one, right? So if you're going to be belaying someone else, you got to have one of these, and you have to know how to use it as well. So that requires training. Next thing I got in here is rope, right? And again, this is not any old rope. You're not going to go to Home Depot and just buy a utility rope and call it a day. You're going to buy a climbing rope that's rated for climbing uses, right? I'm going to keep saying this over and over again, especially whenever we get into our gear maintenance crash course of climb. You use climbing gear for climbing, just like you use swimming gear for swimming, you use caving gear for caving. You're going to use the right stuff for the right job, right? So the reason we're using climbing rope is because it's somewhat stretchy. It absorbs the shock of someone falling. It's quite light. It's quite thin. It fits in our belay devices. That's a big one. This stuff is designed to fit in here, and this stuff is designed to accommodate the rope that we have, right, to a certain range. So using climbing rope that's long enough and, rated for what we're doing is super duper important, right? Next thing I have on there is quick draw. So this is kind of a bare minimum for at least sport climbing, right? I have mentioned trad climbing a couple times. It's rather unusual to start with trad climbing when you first go outside for the first time if you're climbing on ropes. So what I have here in my hand is a quick draw, and this is a sport climbing quick draw, right? Which basically is just a carabiner, a non-locking one typically, connected to a dog bone. So this is just a big sewn thing of nylon. It's pretty stiff. It's pretty strong. Connected to another carabiner. That's really all a quick draw is. What this is doing is you take it, you clip it to a piece of fixed glued hardware into the wall. So at some point someone, has glued in a bunch of hangers. There are these metal rings that are in the wall. Those are just there when you get to a crag, right? Those are just ready to go for sport climbing. But you bring your own quick draw, you clip it in, and then the leader will clip the rope in as they go for sport climbing, right? So this goes to the wall. This one accommodates the rope. Now, you can't really lead climb or sport climb without quick draws. It just doesn't happen. So having usually around 12 of these is a good way to go. But they are expensive, right? So it's going to be best for you to find someone who is already climbing outdoors, is already sport climbing, and then, plan that trip with them and then go with them and use their gear. But yeah, the helmet, shoes, harness, and chalk, that's stuff that you want to have. At this point, we're really talking about stuff that, you're hoping they have that you can borrow and use if it is your first time, right? So yeah, this is a quick draw. That was a belay device there. And then the next thing I have there is anchoring materials. Now, there's no anchoring materials in the picture there. And it's really kind of like an open-ended thing. That anchoring materials is super general. It could be nylon slings. So again, this is made of nylon right here. A lot of climbing gear is made of nylon. So you might find bigger loops of this that are, about this long or even longer than that. It could be cordelette, which is really just thin rope. So this is 9.8 millimeters thick. You might get cordelette that's 6 millimeters to 8 millimeters or so thick. So a good bit thinner than this. Really all anchoring material is doing is providing a way for you to build a tether that can hold on to where you put your rope or yourself, right? So when a leader climbs all the way up to the top of a climb, they might find 2 of those metal rings, those bolts, the hangers, if you will, and they might attach we're going to talk about anchoring, but they might attach a configuration of nylon or some other type of sling setup to those 2 bolts, and then they attach the rope to it, and that becomes your top rope, right? So you imagine a V of soft material connected to a rope via carabiners, and that becomes kind of your top rope. So anchoring material could be fixing either the rope to the wall. It could be a situation where you connect yourself directly to a wall off of the rope, so that way you can have the rope freed up while you're stuck to the wall. And there are reasons for that, but we're not going to get into the thick of that at the moment. But yeah, having anchoring material is needed, for setting things up. It's more of a rigging thing to have anchoring material. And then the last thing I have on there is a trusty pack, right? So you got to carry all this stuff. You got to put it somewhere. You could just, physically carry all these things, but if you have a 20, 30 minute approach, you're not going to be carrying all that stuff on your arms like that, right? So having a good backpack that can accommodate all the stuff is, pretty necessary. The more stuff you bring, the bigger you want the backpack to be. Some people like to have like all the gear for a group and put it in a huge pack and then just use that. Some people like to spread out the gear or ask others to bring their own gear, and then they have it all in smaller packs. It's kind of whatever floats your boat. But yeah, and keep in mind, all this stuff is going to be in addition to whatever else you might bring on a basic hike for the most part, right? So that's going to be your water bottles, your first aid kits, your snacks, your GPS if you have it, multi-tool, like whatever else you find yourself bringing on a trip. If it's cold, you might have extra layers in your bag. So, bring this stuff and then keep in mind what else you might have in a bag. So that was kind of a lot of stuff about rope climbing, which kind of, further explains why rope climbing is kind of harder to jump right into than bouldering is. But are there any questions at the moment? Any concerns or gear questions that go with sport climbing or rope climbing at all right now? Okay. So yeah, the last thing you need to do is get smart, right? And when I say get smart, I'm not saying like, we'll just get into it. Basically, what I'm talking about is and kind of just like how you want to go about breaking into outdoor climbing, right? So same with indoor climbing, there's a set of unwritten rules that are out there. Like you can go outside and just start clipping things all willy-nilly and, doing whatever you think might be right. It might not be safe. It might not be liked by people, but you can do whatever you want outside. It's less regulated than the indoor environment. So we want to make sure that we have a good understanding of what's actually proper and how to, treat people with respect outside. So what I'm talking about is basically the outdoors is a different experience for everyone that goes out there, right? So some people might want to go to a crag and just have like a goofy, fun old time. They might start listening to a bunch of music, be hooting and hollering, and climbing all sorts of stuff and just having their own good time, and they might be enjoying that. While other people might go outside for the peace and quiet and the views and the, just kind of like the ambience of it all. Some people like to climb to get to the top and look at that view and, just have a moment of silence and mind their business. So really what I'm saying is you want to try to watch your volume and just respect the space of others outdoors, right? So, if it's a crag that's pretty popular and there's a lot of people around and it's just kind of a crowded space, listening to music could be okay, maybe, but it might be better if you're going to listen to music, out by yourself. But even then, I would just say that, listening to music and kind of being loud is generally frowned upon for the most part when you're outside, doing your thing. Typically, if you go hiking somewhere, like you don't really hear people just blasting music in the woods. That kind of defeats some of the purpose of being out in the woods, I would say. And as for respecting the space of others, like you don't want to, just start climbing routes that run into other routes of other people. Like if someone's climbing a straight line up here and then you climb a route that goes left, you don't want to collide with their route. You also don't want to, throw up 8-10 ropes on climbs that are all next to each other and then just claim that spot, right? So this is going to get into not hogging the routes, which is the next one there. You don't want to, stay on a route for a really long time when there's other people waiting around to do those climbs. Like if you find the most popular climb in the area and then you just get on it and you start sending like your group of 10 through it, that's good for you, but there's a lot of people that are probably waiting around for that. I find this all the time. Like, if you go to a place and it's your first time there, you want to try to get a lot of the cool climbs in, right? And you'll find that at times there'll be people that are like, hey, can I get on that soon? Or, we've been waiting here for like 20 minutes, like an hour or so, something like that. Do you think we could hop on that route? So you want to be polite to that. You want to think about what people want to do. Like you would like it if people were, not hogging their routes. So try to do the same. And not hogging the routes, again, is also going to talk about, not taking up an entire area, right? So you don't want to just throw 10 ropes all on 10 routes and then just like have them ready for you. And then just, other people come by, they're like, are you guys like climbing here? And you don't want to say like, oh yeah, we're going to get to all these. We already have them set up. Just give us some time. We'll get through it. You don't really want to do that. You want to make sure that everyone has a chance to climb what they want to climb, and you want to treat others with respect. Now, the third thing I have on there is pretty important, right? If it's your first time, it's pretty guessable, I guess. I would say that you're not just going to start doing things willy-nilly with, the technical gear that you have. But I mean, you can't, you just never know how people are going to treat the outside. So I just want to say, if you don't know how to safely do something, if you don't know how to proceed with doing something, whether that's, securing yourself in the gear or cleaning gear off of a wall or, just setting things up in general, you shouldn't put others in danger by trying anyhow. And that's either by you trying and failing or you trying and getting halfway there and then getting stuck, right? If someone has to go rescue you from a wall, that's them putting themselves in danger now to go and get you, who is also in danger. So, go with someone experienced, and, learn, if you're going to learn the stuff and, learn how to set things up, do it on the ground, become proficient at it, and understand it fully before taking it to a wall and actually doing something, right? The next thing I have there is that you'll go outside and you may be wearing a helmet, you may be following all these precautions, and everywhere you go, you're going to find someone who is just wild, right? I think this last summer I went somewhere in North Carolina for a climbing course, and I was with a guy, and the whole time our whole group was wearing helmets and being very careful about the edges. We were always securing ourselves, tethering ourselves. And just, during the whole day, the whole 3 days or whatever that we were there, you see all sorts of people just running on the cliff edges, no helmets, just leaning over edges, setting all sorts of things up, and doing what they're going to do, right? Now, it isn't necessarily our place to decide what is right and wrong outdoors. Now, obviously, that's less safe than what we're doing. That's not really the standard of safety, right? But these are separate people. They are doing their own thing. We're not in charge of them. We're not watching after them. We don't necessarily want to just step in and say, like, you need to wear a helmet. You need to do this. You need to change your ways. Like, that's going to get people pretty upset. Whether or not they're wrong, we are not always, there to say if that's true or not, right? So we really only want to step into a situation if it's clear that they're about to be in serious danger, or if it's clear that they are currently putting themselves in deep danger. Like if they're climbing over the side of a cliff and down climbing into, an area without a rope, that's when we want to say, like, hey, like you are clearly at a great height right now and could fall off at any moment. Stuff like that. But I mean, if people are, just kind of running close to the cliff edge or not wearing helmets in general, we don't really want to just, be the, I don't know, like the person that's running around and just saying, like, you're wrong, I'm right? We want to respect what people are doing, let people make their own decisions, and then, step in if we have to. That's kind of the look you want to have. Indoors, it's a lot easier to not have to worry about that, right? If you're indoors, there's already a staff that's like working to, manage the risk in the environment, and they're monitoring everyone and they're stepping in when people need corrections, right? So we don't have to worry about that. When you go outside, it's just completely different. People come from different walks of life. They come from different teaching styles. They come from different levels of safety. So you really just have to, respect what they're doing. And as long as, they're not completely jeopardizing themselves or others, then we want to avoid, walking up and then trying to correct them. And then maybe they think that, it's actually not that bad. It's a weird gray thing, right? So just being courteous and respectful of others is the way we want to go about this. Now, as for breaking into, outdoor climbing in general, I've said it over and over again, it's easiest if you find someone else that is already climbing outdoors, that already has an idea. So that could be hiring a guide, perhaps. Like maybe if you want to go to a new area, say you want to go to West Virginia, you've never been there, everyone you know has never really climbed there, maybe even have experienced climbing partners who haven't been there, so they don't really know the area. You could hire a guide. There's several bodies that have guides. You could look at the local guides. You could look at like on an American scale, the AMGA has a lot of services for finding guides. Whatever that is, you want to try to find a guide and, go through the area like that. That does cost money though, so that's something to keep in mind. So besides finding a certified guide, you can just find someone who's experienced in the area, a friend of yours. Maybe like if you do have that friend who's never been there, but they're really great at, planning and setting things up, that might be enough to go ahead and go out on a trip and know what's going on. So yeah. I've also mentioned this quite a lot, is that you don't really need to buy all the gear right away unless you really have a passion for climbing and you know it. If you're unsure of how you feel about outdoor climbing and how, what's going on, don't buy all the stuff. Don't buy all the ropes, all the quick draws, all that stuff, and then, go on the climbing trip and maybe be disappointed or maybe not like it as much as you thought, because then you just wasted a lot of money, right? Now, granted, if you do have quite a passion for it and you absolutely love it, go ahead and, start working on buying all that stuff, having your own kind of gear to work with. You're going to be using it anyways. You might as well start diving in. But the best thing you can do is, find someone that has all this stuff and then hop on one of their trips, kind of get the experience, use some of their gear, buy some of the essentials like shoes, but other than that, just find someone and then, make some choices after the fact. And then the last thing I have here is, this whole time I've been assuming that, this is a gym to crag kind of thing. So I'm assuming you've started in a gym, you're going to go outside, but that doesn't always have to be the case. Maybe you're just new to climbing. Maybe you've never climbed before. You're interested in it, and outdoors sounds like a cool place to go. That's great. I would say the best thing you can do is go to a gym and try out some things, learn some things from a gym first. and then get a good idea of, just kind of the basics of climbing. So if you're going to go on a bouldering trip, try to learn to fall indoors. Try to use the crash pads that are placed in the ground, and talk to the staff and learn how to fall securely indoors before you jump into climbing outdoors right away. It'll help. If you're going to go rope climbing, try to learn how to belay someone indoors, get good at it, understand the system, understand how to actually do the action of belaying, and then go outdoors and start doing it there. And if you have already started there, I mean, you started there anyway, so you might as well have a good understanding of indoor climbing before you jump straight into outdoor climbing. So yeah, that is indeed the end of the presentation this week. So are there any questions at all on anything with concerns to getting stuff for going outdoors? All right, sweet. As I mentioned before, I'll go ahead and get out of the screen share. There we go. So as I mentioned before, these will be happening every Tuesday at 12 o'clock. And these are recorded and then posted on the climbing tower section of the RWC's website. So if you did like this session, if you are interested in some of the other stuff that we talked about in the past, you can definitely on to the website there and try to look for some of those topics. I believe they should be fully updated pretty soon. So there's probably 1 or 2 up there right now. We've done a total of 6. So we'll try to go ahead and get all those updated as soon as possible. So yeah, just keep an eye out for future sessions and, get stoked about climbing. That's what we're all about here. And I'll end the recording now.